She caught me in my apartment and said, "You're not supposed to be here." I looked up and whispered, "But, you wanted me here." The moment I stepped into the apartment, I felt the unfamiliar stillness of a place that wasn't yet mine. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, and sunlight streamed lazily through the half-open curtains, catching dust motes in its warm glow. I set down my bag and paused, letting my eyes wander over the modest space that would become home. That's when I heard the soft click of the door behind me, a sound that made me freeze. She was standing there, framed in the doorway, and for a moment, I just stared. The landlady, 42, poised, confident, yet with a softness in her eyes, looked at me as if she were measuring whether I belonged. Her arms were crossed, one hand brushing the silk of her blouse in a gesture that was both casual and deliberate. There was a faint scent, a mix of floral and something warm and subtle, that seemed to fill the small space. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice calm but firm. Not angry, not harsh, just precise. Her gaze lingered on me, slightly narrowed, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, something I couldn't place. I felt a strange mix of boldness and nervousness. My lips curved into a tentative smile, and I leaned just slightly toward her, trying to read her expression. "But, you wanted me here," I replied, my voice steady even though my heart had skipped a beat. There was a pause, almost imperceptible, where she studied me, and I noticed the small details, the faint laugh lines around her eyes, the way her fingers flexed unconsciously, the tilt of her head as if she were both amused and wary. It wasn't confrontational, it was a test, a quiet challenge wrapped in a simple statement. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, and she let out a soft exhale, almost a sigh, but not one of defeat, more of resignation, or perhaps curiosity. I caught a glimmer of warmth beneath the composed exterior, and it made me realize there was more to her than the authoritative figure she projected. The hallway was quiet again, the soft hum of the radiator the only other sound. Even though we hadn't moved closer, the air between us felt charged, like the space itself was waiting for something to happen. I felt my pulse quicken at the subtle intimacy of the moment, the small, unspoken acknowledgement that our encounter was far from ordinary. In that first meeting, there was tension, yes, but also an unspoken invitation, a silent understanding that neither of us fully grasped yet. She was in control, yet somehow, so was I. And in that delicate balance, the slow burn of something more had quietly begun. The apartment was slowly taking shape as I unpacked boxes, the unfamiliar space becoming slightly more like home with every movement. I had just set down a stack of books when I heard the soft, deliberate footsteps approaching, the same rhythm I had come to notice during my first encounter. She appeared in the doorway again, this time holding a small toolkit. The faint floral scent lingered in the air before her, delicate and comforting, almost like a signature. Her hair, pulled back loosely, caught the light at just the right angle, making strands shimmer in soft gold. She didn't speak immediately, just observed me with that same quiet, calculating gaze, a look that was both assessing and unexpectedly warm. "You might need help with that," she said finally, her tone measured, hinting at reluctance. I could sense her careful balance between authority and invitation. I looked up, offering a small, playful smile. "I think I can manage, unless you insist." My voice carried a teasing lilt, but beneath it, I felt a genuine thrill at her presence so close. She sighed softly, a subtle sound that drew my attention. Her eyes softened ever so slightly as she extended her hand to guide me around a tricky corner with the boxes. Our hands brushed, just the slightest touch, but enough for a shiver to travel up my arm. The warmth of her skin against mine lingered for a moment longer than necessary, leaving a faint, electric trace. I noticed the little details, the gentle way her fingers lingered on the edge of the box, the tilt of her head as she studied me, the almost imperceptible smile tugging at her lips. It was fleeting, but it left me with an odd sense of connection, as if the space between us wasn't just physical, but quietly emotional. "You're more careful than you look," she remarked, her voice soft but amused. I chuckled, noticing the faint blush rising on her cheeks. It was subtle, a brief flicker of vulnerability that contrasted beautifully with the poised, confident exterior she carried everywhere else. Even in this seemingly ordinary interaction, the tension between us hummed beneath the surface. There was an unspoken curiosity in her gaze, a silent acknowledgement that our repeated encounters were no longer incidental. I felt the same pull, the anticipation, the warmth, the subtle thrill of proximity. By the time she left, I found myself lingering near the doorway, noticing the way sunlight caught the curve of her shoulder, the soft rhythm of her steps as she retreated. The apartment, once unfamiliar, now felt alive, charged with the quiet promise of something neither of us fully understood yet, but both clearly sensed. A few days had passed since our first encounters, and the apartment was beginning to feel lived in, though still slightly foreign. I was rearranging a shelf when I heard her voice, soft, yet carrying that unmistakable authority. "Careful with that," she called from the doorway. I looked up, and there she was, framed by the warm glow of the hallway light. Her presence was effortless, her posture relaxed yet commanding. She held a small vase, her fingers curling around it with the ease of someone accustomed to careful movement. The subtle fragrance she carried with her, a mix of floral and warm amber, drifted across the room, making my pulse hitch unexpectedly. "Don't worry, I've got this," I said lightly, though I caught the brief, appraising glance she gave me. The way she observed me was intimate without being intrusive, curious yet respectful. Then it happened, a small accident. A stack of books slipped from my hands, and I lunged to catch them, colliding lightly with her. Our bodies pressed together for a heartbeat, just enough for me to feel the warmth of her side against mine. Her hand landed briefly on my arm, not in alarm, but to steady herself, a subtle contact that sent a quiet ripple of awareness through me. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the world outside that small living room ceased to exist. The soft hum of the radiator, the muted afternoon light, even the faint scent of her perfume, all combined into a sensory moment I couldn't easily shake. She exhaled slowly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You're hopelessly clumsy," she said softly, though the teasing tone made it clear she wasn't upset. I chuckled, feeling my own cheeks warm, partly from embarrassment, partly from the intimacy of the moment. "I could say the same about you," I replied, careful to let my voice linger a little longer than usual, hoping she'd feel the subtle connection I was trying to convey. As we straightened the books together, our hands brushed again, fleetingly, and I noticed the tremor in her fingers, subtle, but undeniably human, a rare crack in the composed exterior she presented to the world. I felt a strange sense of closeness, an understanding that we were no longer just landlady and tenant. Something unspoken was threading between us, delicate yet persistent, like a quiet melody building beneath the surface. By the time she left, the room seemed different, warmer, charged with the subtle intimacy of a moment neither of us would forget. I lingered near the window, watching the sunlight fall across the floor, imagining the faint echo of her presence. In that small, accidental collision, I realized the slow burn had truly begun, each touch and glance weaving an invisible thread between us. The apartment had settled into a quiet rhythm, the familiar sounds of creaking floorboards and distant city hum blending with my own thoughts. That evening, I found her in the kitchen, sipping tea as soft lamplight spilled across her features. Her expression was composed, yet I noticed the faint crease in her brow, a subtle tension that hinted at thoughts she wasn't ready to share. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, stepping softly into the room, careful not to break the delicate atmosphere. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and for a moment, the playful confidence I'd seen before seemed tempered by vulnerability. "Something like that," she admitted, her voice quiet but steady. There was a pause, a hesitance, as though weighing how much to reveal. I poured myself a cup of tea and settled across from her, noting the small details I'd come to notice, the faint laugh lines around her eyes, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the soft warmth in her voice that hinted at unspoken stories. I could feel the delicate line between her composure and her humanity, and it made me realize just how much depth there was beneath her polished exterior. We spoke in quiet tones, the conversation meandering from trivial things, favorite books, small daily frustrations, to more intimate reflections. She admitted, almost reluctantly, to feeling the weight of loneliness, a feeling that had crept into her life despite her confidence and control. I listened, sensing the vulnerability she rarely revealed to anyone. "I never expected to enjoy someone's company this much," she said finally, eyes glimmering with a mixture of uncertainty and honesty. "It's different." I met her gaze, my own heart betraying the mix of admiration and hesitation I felt. "Different can be good," I replied softly, letting my voice linger just enough to convey more than words. The silence that followed was heavy, not awkward, but filled with unspoken longing. She shifted slightly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and I caught the faint tremor in her hand, small, human, yet profoundly intimate. The air between us seemed to hum with possibilities we weren't ready to name. It was a delicate tension, a slow dance of emotions, curiosity, desire, hesitation, and the quiet thrill of connection. I realized that our growing closeness carried weight, a mixture of excitement and restraint shaped by age, experience, and the unspoken rules we were both navigating. By the time she excused herself to prepare for the night, I lingered near the doorway, feeling the warmth of her presence fade but the memory of her vulnerability and the quiet intensity of our shared moments lingering in its place. That evening marked a turning point, the first time I sensed that what we were building wasn't just companionship, but something deeper, a slow-burn connection fraught with both longing and restraint. The weekend arrived with a casual warmth that made the apartment feel unusually alive. I was in the kitchen, struggling to open a stubborn jar of coffee, when she appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, leaning slightly on the frame. Her presence was effortless, her posture relaxed but commanding, radiating that quiet confidence I had come to notice in every encounter. "You're hopeless," she said lightly, a teasing edge in her voice that immediately made me smirk. The words themselves were playful, but the way she said them, soft yet deliberate, with just the faintest curve of her lips, made it impossible to dismiss the undercurrent of intimacy. I glanced at her, holding the jar triumphantly. "Hopeless? Maybe. But I can manage, eventually." I paused, letting my voice linger with a hint of amusement, hoping she'd catch the subtle invitation behind my tone. Her eyes sparkled, that rare warmth breaking through her composed exterior. "Eventually, huh?" "I've got time," she replied, the corner of her mouth quirking in a mischievous smile. Her words carried that delicate duality, teasing yet caring, playful yet intimate. As I finally wrestled the jar open, she stepped closer, just enough for her shoulder to brush mine. It was a fleeting touch, barely perceptible, yet it sent a quiet ripple through me. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume, soft and lingering, and the warmth of her presence that seemed to fill the space between us. "You need help with that?" she asked, though her tone suggested she knew I wanted the struggle to continue, a small game between us. I shook my head, laughing softly. "I think I've got it," I said, though I welcomed her proximity more than I cared to admit. For a moment, we stood side by side, our movements subtly mirroring each other, hands reaching for the same counter, shifting slightly in tandem. There was a rhythm in our interaction, an unspoken familiarity that was both comfortable and charged with tension. She tilted her head, giving me a look that was both playful and assessing, as if daring me to respond in kind. I met her gaze, letting a slow smile spread across my face, feeling the warmth in my chest that came with our shared laughter and teasing. As she finally walked away, I lingered in the kitchen, replaying the moment in my mind. The way her shoulder had brushed mine, the sparkle in her eyes, the soft lilt of her voice, each detail etched itself into my memory. It was light, it was playful, but it was also undeniably intimate, a slow-burning tension that made the air between us feel electric. The evening arrived heavy with rain, drumming softly against the windows and turning the city streets into a blurred canvas of lights and reflections. I had just returned from a long day when I heard a soft knock at the door. There she stood, 42, her hair slightly damp, a hint of fatigue in her eyes, yet maintaining that graceful composure I had come to notice. "I forgot my umbrella," she admitted, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. There was a vulnerability in the way she said it, a rare break in her usual poise. I felt a tug of concern and instinctively stepped aside. "Come in. You'll catch cold." She entered, and the familiar scent of her, floral with a subtle warmth, enveloped the small space. The apartment, dimly lit by the soft glow of a single lamp, suddenly felt cocooned in intimacy. The sound of rain against the windows added a rhythm to the silence, each drop echoing the tension that had quietly been building between us. I handed her a warm blanket, and our fingers brushed briefly. The touch was fleeting, yet electric, leaving a subtle warmth that lingered long after our hands separated. She hesitated for a heartbeat, as if weighing whether to lean closer or step back, and then allowed herself a small sigh as she accepted the blanket. We settled near the window, watching the rain cascade down the glass. I noticed the faint tremor in her hand as she held her cup of tea, the slight curve of her shoulders leaning toward me ever so subtly. Without words, I reached over, letting my hand cover hers, just enough for her warmth to seep into my own. She didn't pull away. Instead, her thumb brushed gently over the back of my hand, a silent acknowledgement of trust, of connection. The conversation flowed softly, no longer casual teasing but gentle confessions of admiration and respect. She spoke of the quiet loneliness that accompanied her independence, and I admitted my hesitation, the awe I felt toward her strength and grace. Our voices were low, each word carrying weight, each pause heavy with unspoken longing. A moment came when she rested her head lightly on my shoulder, tentative yet deliberate. The closeness was comforting and electric all at once. I felt the steady warmth of her presence, her heartbeat a quiet drum against my chest. I knew in that moment that the slow burn between us had reached its peak, an emotional crescendo built on shared vulnerability, subtle touches, and quiet trust. The rain continued outside, but inside the apartment, time seemed suspended. Our hands remained intertwined, our gazes occasionally meeting, and the unspoken words, the desire, the care, the fragile intimacy, hung between us. That night, the line between landlady and tenant blurred completely, replaced by something far deeper, profoundly human, and undeniably intimate. The days after the rain felt different, lighter, as if the apartment itself had shifted in response to the unspoken understanding between us. There was a quiet comfort in the space, the familiarity of shared routines, the soft hum of the city outside, and the lingering warmth of moments neither of us would forget. That evening, I found her in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book. The lamp cast a gentle glow over her features, highlighting the subtle strength in her jawline and the soft curve of her smile. She looked up as I entered, and her eyes met mine, warm and calm, carrying the weight of what had passed without needing words. "Thought I'd find you here," I said, leaning against the doorway. She closed her book slowly, marking the page with care, and gestured for me to join her. I sat down beside her, careful to leave space, yet close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her. Our shoulders brushed lightly, a fleeting contact that made my pulse quicken, and I realized how natural it felt, a simple closeness, unhurried and deliberate. We spoke quietly, sharing laughter over a small mishap in the kitchen earlier that week, teasing each other with the ease of familiarity. Her hand, brushing against mine as she reached for her cup, lingered for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. I caught the subtle tremor of warmth and life in her fingers, a reminder that these small, tender touches carried more meaning than either of us dared to say aloud. At one point, she leaned her head lightly against my shoulder, and I felt the quiet steadiness of her presence, her heartbeat, her warmth, the softness of her hair brushing against my sleeve. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried the intimacy of countless unspoken words, the gentle culmination of weeks of small moments, shared glances, and delicate tension. For the first time, the apartment felt truly like home, not just because of the space, but because of the human connection that had quietly blossomed within it. Our laughter mingled with comfortable silences, and I realized that the slow burn of desire and trust had found its natural, unforced conclusion. As we sat there together, hands occasionally brushing, heads close but not urgent, I understood the truth: what we had was steady, respectful, and profoundly human. The age difference, the initial hesitation, the small social boundaries, all of it had melted away in the warmth of genuine affection and understanding. That night, the city outside continued its distant hum, but inside, time felt suspended. We shared a final lingering glance, unspoken yet full of promise. It was a quiet, complete resolution, a slow-burn romance that had grown naturally, patiently, and beautifully, leaving us both wrapped in the warmth of connection, trust, and the gentle thrill of love realized. If you felt the slow-burn tension and warmth of their story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more age gap and forbidden attraction romances, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear which moment made your heart skip a beat.